This video, the middle-aged nerds discuss spoilers from books they read decades ago. Do you really need a spoiler alert? Do you really?
Hey, I'm Glenn the Geeky Hippie.
And I'm Bill, also known as Matt Stagger. And today we have our guest, Roof Mistress Leigh-a from Malkier Talk. Welcome. We're going to be talking about Starship Troopers. So, how was this
Troopers.
reread for you and first read for Glenn?
Yeah, it's one of my blind spots. It was for 50 years now. But
I just don't get that. You're such a sci-fi fan. How do you miss the one Heinlein novel that is so?
I really don't know. I think I must have tried starting it at one point and didn't get into it. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think. So this is the 1959 novella, according to some, by Robert A. Heinlein. He was known mostly at the time for a lot of science fiction juvenile stuff, and he tried to publish this as one of his juveniles, and his editor said no, and so he took it to another publisher and published it. But some consider it the last of his juvenile novels, others say it's the first of his non-juvenile novels. Depends on how you look at it.
I'd
So,
agree with
Leia,
the latter, I think.
Yeah,
non-juvenile, yeah,
not sure I'd
definitely
want
doesn't.
any of the kids I don't have to
Yeah.
read this. Maybe until they're
Right.
a little bit older.
Yeah, 16.
Leia,
Mhm.
you're a first-time guest on Non-Terrestrial Half-Life, and we always ask the question, when did you discover you loved books? And what books led to that? And do you remember how old you were?
I've loved books for as long as I have memories. My parents were really big about reading to us as kids, and we had very large collections of books. There's a picture my mom has of me and my two sisters. She told us to pick up all our books, and instead of putting them in the shelves, we laid them out on every flat surface, including the beds. And she's like, I couldn't even be mad. So there's this like adorable picture of us just sitting on all of our books that we lined up, but it covered the entirety of our room and like went out into the hallway. That's how many books we had as like wee little, like we couldn't even read at that point. um and so I've always loved books. My punishment, my parents, when I got in trouble, my parents learned that like taking the phone away never worked, or grounding me never worked, because I'd just be like, okay, I'd grab, the 5 or 6 books I was reading and just go to my room and
Mhm.
read. They would take away my books and hide them, and then I would find the hiding, so they kept having to like find new hiding spots, or I would check out books from the library. So it was this like constant game of tag of like, where are her books, because she's in trouble.
Right.
So
That's
always
awesome.
always been a big reader.
Yeah, I never got upset about being sent to my room because I always had books in my room. Until my
Exactly.
parents started taking the flashlights and light bulbs out of my room so I didn't
Flashlights,
have the
yes.
light to read. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At
Yeah.
one point, I was literally leaning against the window with with the blinds pulled back so that the street light half a block away would shine on my book so I could
Mm-hmm.
read at 1, 2 in the morning when I'm like 10 years
Yep.
old.
And that's why you wear glasses to this day.
Our first question, normal question. Do you remember when you first read Starship Troopers and how old you were? What led you to reading this book? Go ahead and start with you, Leia.
Well, I was 19. I was in the Naval Academy, and we had our first Marine Corps Commandant of the Naval Academy, and he had a reading list, and this
Mm.
was on it. So I read it while I was home over the holidays for Christmas break, and had only seen the movie at that point.
Oh,
And
wow.
the book was very
Oh,
different. I was like, oh, cool. Like,
Yeah.
Colonel Allen wants us to read this like sci-fi, like that's fun. And it was again very different.
Yeah.
So but still I found it fascinating. And it's stuck with me as something that I've been wanting to reread. And so when y'all brought it up, I was just like, I think it was like we were just talking about books, and it's like, oh yeah, we should totally do that one. So
yeah.
Yeah, for
And it
me,
fit.
I was 16 because I remember I had just gotten my license. I was playing Little League Baseball, And I went to practice and I was like really early, like an hour early, and I had checked out Starship Troopers from the high school library. And I was bored and I was sitting in the dugout reading. And it got to the point where I got annoyed when people started showing up. So, I mean, I really got into it after the first couple chapters, and I was kind of mad I had to go practice.
Oh,
So that's my
sports
main
getting in the way
memory
of
of
your
that.
book.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I was a soccer player, so I know the feeling. You know, I would read on the way to soccer games in the bus and get shit given to me about it the whole way.
I attach it to this feeling of freedom because I had just got my license. It was one of the first times I was allowed to take the car out on my own,
Mm.
was take myself to practice. So I remember
That's
having the book and my glove over in the passenger seat and just, I don't know, sitting in that dugout reading was sort of a this is awesome kind of moment for my little teenage self. So I
freedom.
remember that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I first read this book when I was 50. So, yeah. It's the first time that I'm the first time reader on this. We've had a couple of books where Bill was reading it for the first time, but I and the guest had both read it before. So it's fair to turn it around and find a book, and you picked a good one that I hadn't read. So I'm glad I read it. I needed to read it. Um, Not entirely happy with some of the stuff in there, but it's mostly the preachiness that really put me off. I don't remember Heinlein being this preachy, but I thought about it, and I think one of his other books definitely got preachy. Now that I think back on it,
I
um,
mean, Stranger in a Strange Land, it's pretty preachy.
yeah, that's what I don't remember it being preachy, but I remember certain scenes that I think probably were, and I just didn't feel it was preachy at the time I read it. I didn't feel
Mm.
preached to, so. Um, what were your memories of reading this book for the first time? Bill, we heard you're playing the baseball games. Um, did it stand out to you from the books you had previously read, and did it change any of your reading habits or preferences?
It was the first Heinlein book I ever read, so it absolutely got me interested in Heinlein. Um, you know, the sort of idea of the armored suit had been around for quite a while by the time I read this, but I mean, given the published
Right.
date, I'm like, this is one of the first. And I
Hmm.
mean, the idea,
Yeah.
I remember specifically the Y image of the cannons they had on the suits described.
Mm,
And I remember I was just fascinated by that sort of shape that would come up and out of the suit.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, it definitely got me more interested in science fiction. So yeah, I'd say it definitely changed my reading habits a little bit because I was mainly fantasy at that point.
How would you, Leah?
It didn't really change my habits, but what it did was it opened up an avenue for me to have conversations about sci-fi and fantasy with people because again it was on the mandatory reading list at the Naval Academy, so everybody was reading these books. This was the
Right.
only uh, sci-fi or fantasy, the only one of that nature on the list. The other ones were like Black Hawk Down.
Hmm.
So it was very interesting to engage in those conversations with people that weren't used to reading these types of books and that were like, that was actually kind of good. So
Now, did you guys discuss the books in class or just between yourselves? Was it
just
something you
between
talked?
ourselves, there was a
Okay.
list of 30 books, I think, total, and I really honestly don't remember. This one and Black Hawk Down
The
are the
rest
only
of
ones
it.
that really stick in my brain. I'm sure I'll remember some of the other ones eventually, but because those are the two that emotionally that stuck with me for a long time. And yeah, so it's just like as people were reading it was just something that we could discuss.
Gotcha. All right. The first time you read this book, who was your favorite character? Not a lot of characters to choose from in this one.
Well, I mean, it's
At
Rico.
least not developed characters that
Yeah.
really. Um, and has your recent reread changed that at all? Who your characters?
Yeah, Zim.
I yeah, I kind of like
Honestly, Zim
Zim.
is Zim is awesome, and I love the fact that we
Yes.
don't find out that Rico's sergeant is Zim until the almost the
Mhm.
very end. He's like, "Oh, my sergeant? Yeah, I knew him. I knew him very well."
Mhm.
And it's
His
like it
name
was
was
Zim.
Zim.
Oh, wow, awesome. So yeah, I kind of like Zim. I like the Zim knew his limitations too, because there was that one part where he was like, "Look, I'm not made for this," and he's talking to his captain, going, I don't think this is good.
Mhm.
So I think I had more respect and a little more love for Zim this time than I did my first.
I definitely read Rico differently this time. I was pre-military, so I was like just at the beginning of my military service. I was on the officer track, and again, I was basically waiting for the movie to start happening during the book, which it does not.
No.
No.
It really doesn't. So the way I've read Rico, having been in the military for having done 9 years of active duty service, and then working for the military for the past, oh my God, like basically the past 25 years. It's reading Rico was very different this time. So with the experience, the lens, and seeing all the stages that he went through and being like, oh yeah, I remember when I used to think that. um, so it was really fun, just kind of like being able to actually really identify with the main character this read through.
I'm picturing you
Okay.
at like chapter 7 going, "Oh, you sweet summer child."
Yeah, seriously.
Well, get some examples of what they made you reacting like that.
It was especially once he got out of boot, like some of the experiences in boot where he just um the I don't think I belong here, and the oh shit. You just it was more honestly, it was more once he was in the military, he was doing the things, some of the attitudes that he had, and then once he became an officer, because that was my big experience was as an officer. So when he was in his midshipman, his OCS training, I
Right.
was a midshipman. His
I was
OCS
thinking of him
training,
as a midi myself. So
yeah. So just the grind and the expectations of leadership at that point, and then as an officer, how their expectations of their officer corps. I really appreciated the way that that was written up. So
one
because,
thing
and
I
Oh,
I think that's
really
why a 1958 book was on the Commandant's reading list in 2002, 2003, whatever year it was, because those leadership qualities are ephemeral. And that's something I believe that Colonel Allen really wanted us to take away was you need to inject these aspects into your life. And that was the kind of leader that I identified with. So now seeing it on the flip side, when I have implemented that, like I was that type of leader, I did those types of things, put my sailors first, and it's like, oh cool, yeah, whew,
nice.
okay, I got the lesson. I got it right.
One of the things I really appreciate about this book, and no offense, utmost respect for people who graduate from the academies, because it's not easy. I know that. But I'm a firm believer that the majority of the officer corps should be Mustangs, brought up from the enlisted ranks. And it looks like that's how the military, or at least the mobile infantry, works. That all the
Hmm.
officers started as enlisted, troops, and then got promoted up. I love that. I really like that, and it's what I'm doing in my own science fiction writing. The military I've got written, 99.9% of all officers are Mustangs. Started out, as an E1, and worked
Hmm.
their way up. Um, I just, I I still have academies in there, but it's OCS. They don't call it
Yeah.
OCS, they call it the academy. You know,
Well, it's
but
like the
I do like.
assassin, the assassin character had promoted up to be an officer, but he was basically capped because he needed to go back and get that formal education. So, and I
Mhm.
think that
So
is
that's
what a
okay.
lot of what the academies provide is like, it's not just tactical experience and you're promoted because you have leadership qualities. You need that refinement. And I think that is the major difference between the officer corps. Is at the beginning of the books, it's at the beginning of Starship Trooper, Rico's asking the question like why, and
Mhm.
the sergeant comes back and says that's above our pay grade. We don't need to know that. We just need to know that we need to go do the thing. We don't care about why. And so the why is really important. So why and how. So, and that's what you learn, and it's a continual educational process. So the academies are one of the first places that, or schooling basically.
Right.
And we actually don't even require the level of education that the academies have. You could literally just have graduated from college, go to OCS right now, and then so you won't have a lot of those ethics classes that I took. We took because Navy navigation. We took a lot of these
Right.
Mhm.
fundamental classes to have a larger understanding of our military service, and that's the tactics, it's the ethics, those are the things that you need in order to make those higher level of echelon. So I do agree like sending a kid straight out of college who hasn't seen any form of like okay, yeah, we marched around for fun, ha ha ha, it was summer camp, like
Right.
and, oh shit, now I'm actually in the military. Not always the best thing, and you could tell like some people just really didn't cut it, and it was interesting that they talked about that in the book. Was that they were able to weed out the people that really should not be in leadership position, and
Yeah,
that's
the
something that
empty suit. The empty suit.
yep.
Like, yeah, when the sergeant's running everything, it's an empty suit. They need to go. And they
Yep.
were really good about weeding those people out. But like that's fine because most people are okay with a leader who can make
Hmm.
decisions. That's one of the things they kind of pushed was even if you make a bad decision, that's better than no decision.
Yes.
Sitting there and waffling back and forth is the worst thing you can do for your people. So
Yeah, I always think about in Band of Brothers, David, God, what's his last name? The guy who played Ross and Friends.
Schwimmer, yeah, David
Yes,
Schwimmer.
thank you. His character, like just like such a dorky, twerpy, like it's a total dickhead when he's in charge of the guys at boot camp, and then when he gets out in the field, he has no idea what he's doing. He's actually
Mhm.
putting them in so much danger, and
Sobel, yeah, it was Captain
yeah, and
Sobel.
and that happens like it. So for better for worse, how we have our military set up, like I see pros and cons with it,
Oh
but I
yeah.
do think don't put having the Strobels in charge is scary.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you can't read a map, you have no business, leading a division, a
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
platoon,
Even
anything.
today, they need to be able to do it on. They need to be able to get around without relying on electronics of any sort. Because
Yeah.
but what if anything had you forgotten since the first time you read this until you reread that really stood out, or you were pleasantly surprised or unpleasantly surprised, maybe?
I mean, for me, I completely forgot that at the end of the book, his sergeant is his father. I had completely forgotten that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that the sort of meeting up with him on the way to officer school was awesome. So I figured that okay, I forgot about that too, but that was cool. So I figured that's where it would end. And then at the very end, I'm like, oh crap. Like, wait, wouldn't that be a conflict of interest? Be a little worried about having your your son be your commanding officer, but I mean, hey, if it works, it works.
When I was first reading through it, I read Rico much more seriously. So I don't know if it's time has passed and I'm reading it differently, or the audio narrator kind of made him a little bit more perky than when what my head was reading when I read through the first time. So I don't know if it was which one of those. Maybe it's a combination of both. You know,
Do you remember who your narrator
more
was?
upbeat. 1 second, I can tell you.
Yeah,
I have James. Last name is James. Lloyd James, I think.
Yep, Lloyd James.
Yep, Lloyd James.
Okay, so we listen the same. I
Yeah.
really like. That's one of those scenes that I really enjoyed, was the scene where him and his father, run into each other at the station,
Yeah.
wherever, whatever the transit station or whatever that was. Or were they at Sanctuary? I think they were at Sanctuary. I thought that was a really touching scene, that. Other than that, like I said, I read it for the first time 2 weeks ago, and then the last 2 days, so nothing really changed for me.
Understandable.
Right. So,
Did
how has your
you
life?
pick up on
Go ahead.
things? Did you pick up on anything on your second read through and it's like, oh, like did it make more sense?
Yeah, I've got some notes written down. They're mostly some nitpicks, and stuff like that. Some stuff that just annoyed me. That mostly there, but I do have notes like the father and son scene.
I paid
I
attention
only
to
have
tactics a lot more this time. I didn't my first read, I was just in the story. So I wasn't aware.
Mm-hmm.
This time I paid attention to actual some of the movements that, especially when he was an officer there when they're on Planet P, where I'm like, oh, okay, I see what he's. So I could mentally
okay.
picture it better. I have a better understanding of what he was going for, placing certain units in certain areas. So yeah, I definitely looked at the tactics throughout the book way different. So yeah,
Well,
I
call me
did notice
stupid, but
that.
I have a question for you guys. I totally don't understand what he did wrong when he did that during simulated combat with simulated enemy and simulated weapon. I loved how Heinlein repeated the simulated throughout the sentence.
Uh-huh.
Um, but he did something, got in trouble, and got 5 lashes for it.
Yeah.
I didn't catch either time what he did wrong,
Um,
and that would not just me be stupid.
he didn't check that the area was clear. There were simulated soldiers on his side who were within the blast area. He didn't radio to make sure it was clear.
Within the blast area of his own bomb.
Yes.
Okay, that makes
And
sense
he
now.
probably should have checked and protected his downed guy also. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that guy he was locked up or whatever, so he probably was, injured. So I think there was probably a couple things that he
Yeah.
did.
I mean, he made some
I was
bad
just
decisions,
totally
which
confused there, but all right.
And that would, yeah, and that's something I don't remember picking up on. The 1 in every 500 rounds was an actual round. I don't know that I necessarily picked up on that the first time, but that is a way to make training legit. Like, holy shit, I might get
Yeah.
shot. No
And
joke.
they're actually
There's a
the instructors are actually
possibility.
aiming at them too.
The
It's
guy
just
who
like,
got shot in the butt.
so how has your life experience changed your perspective on this story, on the characters and quality of the prose? The prose is standard Heinlein prose, I think.
I think we pretty much covered how our viewpoint has changed, especially, Leah with her experience as being an officer. For me, basically the same. I paid attention. No, well, not same as in I was an officer, just the same in I have more life experience, so I'm looking
Mhm.
at everything different. The prose, it's not flowery, it's not beautiful, it's not meant to be. This is hard science fiction.
Yeah,
Um,
from the point of view
a
of
lot of
a
military
roughneck.
jargon, which makes sense. It is, but I do love the fact that he was able to portray the sort of infantryman's plight so well through the whole thing.
Mhm.
Because it is a
Yeah,
completely different skill set and sort of mindset you have to be the boots on the ground as opposed to the one, who's, uh, you know, leading them or whatever. It's a different experience, and there are times it feels like a meat grinder, you know. So I can
Yeah.
appreciate that Heinlein was able to tap into that. So
Hmm.
I think he did that
Another
rather
thing,
well. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
another, it's all good. Another thing besides just my general military experience, like having a completely different life skills, um, was I've become much more of a feminist since I was in my early 20s. Wasn't really encouraged at the Naval Academy to be a feminist because, you know, the
I don't
patriarchy,
imagine.
male dominated alpha male society, like didn't really want us to be girly girls. So it was interesting, and again, I kept having to tell myself like this wasn't written in the past like 5-10 years, like it's a bit of
Right.
an older book. So, you know, and now we have women rangers, we've got women in so many fields. I did appreciate that, how even writing when he did, there weren't women, especially in the US, who were active duty. They were only allowed to be in restricted lines. They weren't in the
Right.
front lines of
Auxiliary.
anything. So they weren't
Yeah.
pilots. They weren't on ships. So the fact that he did include a little bit of that was, I think, was very progressive for his time. But there was a couple of times where it's just like, oh, for fuck's sake, like doing it for the women, like having a
Well,
women's
see,
voice
Yeah,
in your
that
ear, like,
voice,
you
the
know,
oh.
last thing you hear
there
matters.
he's got the women in role in military roles that can see them kill. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't go
Yeah.
far enough, and that he doesn't have any excuse not to go far enough in this, because you take 100-pound woman who's 5'4" or 5 foot tall, as long as you can put a armor suit on her that fits her, she's just as strong as Arnold Schwarzenegger would be in an armor suit. You know, because the strength is not coming from the person anymore. The strength is coming from the armor they're wearing. There's no
Absolutely.
reason women should not have been drop troopers, like just like Rico.
Or couldn't
No
have been.
reason whatsoever. Couldn't have been. They would
Absolutely.
have been, and some of them might have actually been better, because most of the women I know tend to be more agile, not so much, have better agility than most of the guys I know. At least my guy friends are pretty, have a big lack of nimbleness.
Hey man,
You
are
know,
you low key calling me fat?
she's nothing compared to me, homie. Um, so yeah, that was bugging me the entire way through. It's like, why aren't there any women in this power armor? Because the power armor is doing all the work. You know, if it wasn't for the whole discipline reasoning behind breaking them down in basic training, all the physical exertion and exercise, that's not as much about getting them in a physical shape. It is, but it's not. And especially in here, because, like I said, they don't need to be in great physical shape. All they need is agility, not
Well, and
strength,
yeah,
not
and
speed. They need
it's
agility.
not about the physicality, it's about the mindset. And I do
Yeah.
think, um, especially especially these days when feminism is such a big thing, you know, we're still trying to push like you can do anything you want to do, still trying to break into those fields. Like you've got to want it so bad, because you know there is someone dickhead there that's really going to try to force you to quit. And I'm not
Yep.
gonna lie, at the Naval Academy there was a lot of guys that still, while I was there, that still had that mindset. So anyways, we're digressing a lot of off.
I
But
see.
so that was one thing that I did notice in the book that I didn't notice on the first read, was like, and I think at that time I was, women weren't in the Rangers. There was 5 lines restricted to us, that we couldn't do. So we couldn't be snipers, we couldn't do infantry, we couldn't do tanks, and I special forces, and then there's another one I don't remember. But so there's literally 5 things. Oh, submarines. There are 5 things
Yeah.
in the entirety of the military that women were not allowed to do. Women had only been on ships for, I think, 15 20 years at 15 years at that point. So like women on ships were still new. My first ship, I was one of 3 female officers, and that was it, in a complement of over 250 men. So like, just, I understand a little bit of where that writing came from. And but also on the flip side, it's just, Glenn, like you said, why couldn't somebody do that? So yeah.
I'm sorry,
Honestly,
Bobby Draper would whoop Robert Heinlein's ass any day
Right.
without her
well,
armor.
I mean, you kind of got to do the Robert Jordan lens thing, where okay, when was this written? When was this
Yeah.
published? What was
Yeah.
going on at that time? And go, okay, you
It
did
was
some things
very
right,
progressive
but
for that time.
you did some things right, but you could have done better, which is,
Yeah.
the whole Robert Jordan lens all over again. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
try and do
Heinlein
that
is
with
kinda
most
known
things I read.
Heinlein is kind
Exactly.
of known for being a sexist. It's there through all of his stuff. Even Stranger in a Strange Land
Well,
has
yeah.
some blatant sexism going
Mhm.
on. Especially from the character that's him in the story. But because in all actuality, he's Jubal. That's who Jubal is based off of, him is him. So let's see. We're talking about about it already, but let me just get it out of the way. If there's any other elements of this book that clash with today, the way we look at things today, is there much else that really bothers you, or that sticks out that would clash with today?
Well, I mean, I'm not a fan of restricting people's rights to vote if they don't serve in the military.
Thank
So,
you. Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
that
to be fair, it does
that's not
hint
the
a
only
couple
way.
of times in the book. Yeah, a couple of times in the book, there's a couple of sentences that hint that you can have non-military stuff.
Yeah.
But repeatedly, they're like, you need to be a veteran. You need, what was the quote? There was a quote that I only want people who put their life on the line to make decisions, not people who, and I'm like, yeah, but what about the quadriplegic who's blind that you mentioned earlier? Feeling, what is he going to do? He has the right to vote. He's not, there's no reason to say no, except how the heck is he going to do anything, for 2 years of service? So that
It's an
Heinlein
interesting
tried later saying,
theoretical concept of how
yeah,
to run a government. So
well,
yeah, I don't agree
apparently
with it.
Years later, Heinlein apparently tried saying that 95% of government service is non-military in this setting, but he doesn't give us that impression. That's something he tried saying years later, like in an interview or a letter or something he'd written.
Well, the impression is
not.
from within the military. And believe me, when you're in the military, that is your world. So you don't really look outside that much.
And
I hate to break
Leigh-a
that to you,
mentioned,
but that makes sense
Leigh-a
for the
pointed
book.
out that she faced, people trying to force you to quit. What's to stop them from forcing people to quit? People who they believe are going to vote in the wrong way. They have the wrong outlook. We don't want that person to vote, so we're going to force them to quit. That's too easy to do. When the organization itself wants you to quit, they will make you quit. They will make you quit.
You can't
And,
afford to have that mindset when you are literally training for battle. You can't do that. Yeah, that kind of mindset
or
is
any
gonna.
other job.
I'm just saying it's not going to work. So you don't have those people making those decisions. You weed them people out, and you keep an eye on everything going on. That's the best you can do.
Weeding out is exactly what I'm worried that can be done. If you can weed out somebody's ability to get the franchise,
do you want to weed out the people?
So the only way people could make the choice, because the way it's written in the books is the people could, unless they volunteer to leave, they cannot get weeded out. So they would just get so they wouldn't necessarily maybe survive all the way through the mobile infantry. Like they might say like, hey, this isn't for me. Can I do, like, they'd be able to do something else within that military service. Now it might end up not being quite as cool because you might be one of those test dummies for whatever experiments are going on. But it says multiple times in the book that only by volunteering not to do your term of service
And
would
when I
you leave and not gain, and the only thing you would get was you'd be unable to get your right to vote. So you could not get in that
But
drop ship and you
they
would
can
lose your vote.
always make it worse on you. If you've got the wrong beliefs and they want to get you out, they can make it worse for you than
yeah,
anybody
but
else so bad that
you
you have
weed
no
out the
choice
people who
but to
want
quit.
to act that way, Glenn. You're not listening. You weed out
And
those
how do you
people
weed them out? How do you weed them
by
out?
watching.
By making them quit before they get to a
No,
point of a
by
position of
watching
authority.
and kicking them out.
And okay, so then you can, but the thing is you can't kick them out
You
Well,
can't.
and
unless they commit a crime.
I think this all is
You
a
can.
larger government conspiracy theory. So, and I mean, yes, it is meant to limit the people who do vote to the people who hypothetically are willing to put their lives on the line, and that's what the goal of that government is. And it was very interesting, and I wish that there had been like maybe like a story of how some of these other governments formed, because it talks about the rebellion in Scotland, that where
In Aberdeen.
the
Yeah.
fighters got together and they did end up hanging 2 other veterans, and that was kind of the genesis of this new system wide, because it wasn't just on Earth, it became all the colonies, everywhere where humans existed, that was the universal government at that point. So
One of
which
Johnny's teachers or instructors at one point says something about that they want people, as we were talking, they want the vets who put their welfare of the group before their own. Problem is, they joined for selfish reasons. They didn't. Nobody said I'm joining because I want to defend humans. Everybody's joining to be a citizen for a selfish end. Yet we're told that they joined for a selfless end. They're not out for personal gain. Yes, they are getting the franchise. Being a citizen is personal gain. Man, I can't talk sometimes. Tongue tied.
it is
it's
it's a
he contradicts himself. The
mhm.
characters, at least, are contradicting themselves, but these characters are all Heinlein's voice, and it's just that whole thing of limited franchise is it's the big
Well, and
thing
also you
most
have to
people
look at
complain about.
the POV of the character who's talking as
Right.
somebody who has bought into the system. So they forget that it is that signing up and wanting to vote can't it's both selfless and selfish all at the same time. It can have that duality. So the fact that you are being told like it's very possible you're going to die, like we are trying to discourage you because this might not end up well for you, this might not end up where you think. So yes, it is selfish, but it also is selfless. Like the act can be both.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's some
Yeah.
gray area in there as far as
Mhm.
outlook, and anybody who actually makes it through the basic process in this book, they're dedicated to what they're doing. Their
Mhm.
motivation, I mean, does it really matter? They made it. They were able to push through, so I'm okay with it. I mean,
Questioning their motivation is only because it's being told to us what their motivation is by another character and saying it was the flat out blanket statement that I think it was one of his sergeants who said
by a
that the
character who
people who
can't know everybody's motivation though, so you got to realize it's a
either that or
limited
it was
POV.
Mr. Dubois. It might have been Dubois. It might have been Mr. Dubois that said that. Speaking of which, history and moral philosophy is a hard science, according to
I thought that
Heinlein,
was so
and it can
laughable.
be expressed with mathematics. Now, there is
Binary
symbolic
set.
logic where they can do philosophy stuff on paper and it looks like math, but it's not a hard science. It's not mathematically solid.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Well,
no,
I mean, I in quite a few science fiction I've read, that same sort of mindset where it's like, look, here,
psychohistory.
here's the binary set solution. Either you do this or you die. That's it. It's that's it. It's
Right.
a binary solution set. So I get where they're coming from when they say there's a math component. There is. 1 + 1
You
= 2, period.
Yeah, and I do see how you could write it up as a mathematical theorem. So like I
Yeah.
very much see how you could do that. again,
But hard
that's
science? No.
that's not a hard
No.
science. Like
No.
I'm sure there's like you could write it to justify that, that here's the theorem at the beginning and then the conclusion and your justification. It's just simpler way to write it than a paper, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that
That
being
class was nothing
abused.
that class was nothing more than pure indoctrination.
Well, yeah.
It was like I never went through any kind of indoctrination like that when I was in school. Thank God. That would have just been. I would have been suspended within an hour, within the first
School?
week
No.
of that
Basic
class.
training? Yes.
See, I didn't get it I didn't get it at when I was in basic training at Great Lakes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was Army. Real basic training.
Yeah.
Let me be clear.
Oh, we're gonna
Okay.
start this Army Navy conversation.
No, we're not.
No, you two
It
at
was
least
funny
made
in the
it
books,
through.
like them talking about the Army versus the Navy, and I just got a good chuckle out of it.
Yeah, and in all honesty, they're not an Army; they're a Marine Corps, because the Navy takes their asses place. They drop them all the time. That seems more Marine to me than Army.
So Marines are meant to be an expeditionary force where they're only there between 30 and 60 days. They're not technically meant to be embedded, even though that's not how we deploy them these days. The Army is what's meant to be that embedded long-term force. So again, that is not how we use our Marines these days. Our Marines and Army very much overlap in their strategic missions, but
and we're all better than Space Force, so we're fine.
Yeah, right, exactly. So
did you guys catch the line? There was a line that Johnny said about the pay at any rank was barely spending money. Got to take that with a grain of salt, because Johnny's from a 1% family. His family is one of the most wealthy families in Argentina, and so I don't know what spending money is to you when your family's millionaires and billionaires, but I'm sure that it's still going to be more than what people who are doing work for, the officers and the enlisted are making. What, if any, are some themes and or character flaws that you notice now that you may have missed in your previous reading of the book?
I mean, as far as themes, like I said, I think it does focus on the average boots on the ground soldier. Their sort of struggle, that whole fleet does the fly-in, mobile infantry does the dying attitude, and accepting that and the sort of mindset that goes along with that. It's definitely a theme. I think a very frustrated Heinlein was seeing how veterans may have been being treated. And that was one of the reasons his response in this book was so sort of hard, was, you better appreciate these people. This is what they go through and all of that. So, you definitely feel that coming through about respecting those who have served. So
that's
take that
very much what I picked on, was the what I call like the Vietnam War syndrome. So even though this predates Vietnam, so this would be right as the Korean War was going on. But
so the start of, because the Korean War was the start of sort of the American people sort of turning on soldiers and seeing them as bullies as opposed to protectors. So
yeah, well, and I feel like immediately after World War II, there was this reverence for the people who served, who came home. But then when there aren't enough jobs, and like there became this jadedness as time went on, that the reverence did go away. And so setting up the government being this run by former military people, like the value, kind of like pointing in your face the value of military service. Glenda, what you were talking about, like that duality of the only people, the concept of the only people who deserve to vote are the ones who are willing to sacrifice themselves, even though it's a choice. Yeah, that came across. I don't think I read that at all when I was in my early 20s, but or teens or however old I was. And so, but you know, it's very there. It's not hidden at all.
Yeah, no,
No.
it's not subtle.
No, and I don't know how I missed it the first time. Yes, because I was waiting for those spider things to attack.
The arachnids.
Where's the
King of
arachnid?
Heinlein at one point has someone say that all war derives from population pressure. I think he's forgotten about a few wars, like the spread of Islam. That wasn't population pressure. That was we want to spread this religion, and that's how it spread throughout the Middle East. The Revolutionary War, I'm pretty sure that had nothing to do with population pressure. The Civil War, well, we all know that was about slavery, not population pressure. World War II.
It was about the
war in
population
Ukraine.
of enslaved people. So that you could hypothetically say that was about a population.
Yeah, but not
hypothetically
stretching that.
The original colonists came over here due to population, so you could say that the Revolutionary War was also populist related.
I do feel like it's an oversimplification, because you could even say the religious wars are the population of. So again, it's an extreme oversimplification. You could put that as a layer in with things, but yeah, no, I agree with you, Glenn. I disagree that is the cause of every single. But I could see how if you. It's a cause. It's a factor. It's not. It might not even be a cause, but yeah, you could.
It's an
write
ingredient?
one of those scientific theorems and justify that. Like, this is actually a population thing. Yeah. So
I wanted to point something out. That case, that story about I think it's a temporary third lieutenant. You know, which I don't know why they did, and that in a real wet navy, that actually happened. It was June 1st, 1813. It was William Sitgreaves Cox, and it pretty much exactly what was described. You know, he left his post. It was cashiered out, but there's a falsehood in that statement in there, because it was said that his family for 150 years tried to clear his name to no success. 1952, his rank was restored and cleared by Truman. 7 years before this book came out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did the mech suit not give it away that this is fiction? I mean,
he's quoting a real life. He's referring to a real life person and event, and then saying something didn't happen when it did. Just wanted to bring that up. If people didn't, the guy did get his rank back. But I was wondering, I brought that up because, is there anything comparable to a temporary third lieutenant? Would that just be a midshipman?
So midshipman is a non-rank. So it exists outside the hierarchy. So it's it's a cadet. You are not allowed to give orders to anybody. Anybody who's above you can give orders. So all of the officer corps can give you orders that you have to follow. So you don't have a commission. You've signed.
Do you answer to warrant officers?
An oath.
Do you answer to warrant officers too?
Yes, if warrant officer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So, but it's a training position. So it's like that's what cadets and midshipmen are. They're meant to be training to be officers.
Now you do have to do a cruise while you're still a midshipman, don't you?
At the Naval Academy and during ROTC, yes. OCS, no.
Okay, when you're doing the cruise, are you still just a midshipman during those cruises?
Just a midshipman. Just a midshipman.
Okay, so they don't do a temporary.
Stupid things the officers tell you to do, and basically most of the enlisted guys can boss you around too, because you don't know anything.
So like 99% of the ship would die before you're in charge.
Yeah, I mean, everybody would be dead. You'd be the
Yeah.
only person left. You would be the only person left.
Be like,
So
well, at least I know
this
the one
this
person
fiction
will follow
here,
my orders.
this is just a
Mm.
fictional rank, process that he developed for this story to have a temporary lieutenant blankety blank officer that's
mean,
actually just a cadet or a midshipman
The
being
entire
Well, it's a
temporarily.
test.
society
Yeah,
is.
But he's. I'm
it's
trying to see
fascinating. I
what.
thought it was fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to see what from the real military he pulled. And like, there was one thing, and I didn't learn it hear it through Starship Troopers. I first heard it through a David Weber novel, the Honor Harrington series, that a Marine or Army captain or another ship's captain that's on your ship gets a temporary social promotion, to if they're a Marine or Marine or Army captain, they become a major when you refer to them, and if they're a captain from another ship, they become Commodore. In this, I don't know if they do that similar for captains on another ship, if it's Commodore or Admiral, what they rank them up to, because we don't have Commodores anymore.
We do have, we've got positions that are called Commodores. So,
right, I was just going to say, it's not a rank, it's a position.
Yeah,
I looked that up recently. I was
on
curious.
destroyers, the way the Navy is right now. So, and again, this is just how our Navy works. Doesn't mean that I'm speaking for all the other military services in the world that exist. But so it's a 05, so a commander is the captain of the ship, but then the 06 captain is the commodore of the squadron. So yeah.
Yeah, Commodore.
So
the
it's like
rank
not
of Commodore
confusing
is
at
now
all.
Yeah, Commodore used to be Rear Admiral lower half. Now and they switched it to.
But that's Yeah, that's a British ranking. So yeah, ours are positions. Yeah, it's a position, not a rank. So
it also makes sense in an emergency situation. You don't want people shouting, hey, Captain, and 5 people turning around.
Right.
So it does make sense to alter, people's titles when they enter a ship. It just makes sense.
And it was something I had never thought of until I was reading Honor Harrington stuff, and they did it there. And then I looked up online and found out, oh yeah, the U.S. Navy, U.S. military actually does do that kind of stuff. This was the first time I'd seen it referring to the Commodore, captains. Yeah, I figured they just get called skipper. If I was a captain, I was visiting your ship, you're a captain.
It depends.
Some people like to be called skipper. Some people do prefer to be called skipper than captain. So don't call me captain, call me skipper. So it's all personal.
Yeah, but don't do it if they don't say that, because some people will crash down on you for saying it. That's like calling you, Gunny. You got to make sure they want to be called Gunny before you start calling them Gunny.
I didn't know that.
Or they will smash you. You don't know me. You don't get to call me Gunny. I've seen it happen.
Gunnery sergeant.
Like, yeah, you don't know me. You don't get to call me Gunny.
Hey, Gunny, sergeant, gunnery sergeant.
I'm like, that guy's getting smoked. Oh, you just know it's coming. Like, that dude's going to be doing push-ups forever. I mean, I enjoyed this reread. Like I said, there were aspects I picked up on I didn't when I was younger. Like I said, paid attention to the military tactics a lot more this time, and I can see why they would suggest reading it. Yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to continuing with some more Heinlein. Our next book's going to be a lot of fun.
August, we're doing more Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land with Josh from The Way of the Leaf.
Yep.
Oh,
Josh
fun.
Grox.
He's awesome.
So that's going to be fun. And we will be having Leigh-a back at some point, I hope, on this channel again. But you'll definitely be seeing her coming up again soon here on What the Adaptation. So keep your eyes open there. We've got a special 7-week season coming up that a little bit outside of our box over there, but thank you guys for watching today. We will be returning in 3 weeks. Right offhand, I'm not sure which book we're doing next, but we'll be back. Oh, we're doing Flowers for Algernon. We'll have my friend Chad on and have a good conversation about what I thought was a short story. It turns out it was a book. So I'm going to have to read the entire book. Yeah, it's both. And I never read the book. I read the short story. So I'm like halfway there. So thanks for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, and don't forget to be awesome.
See ya.